Hello, good day students. I am Jaime Pastrana, working as Scrum Master. And today I would like to share my experience related to Agile Foundation and Practices. So let's start. Okay, now the big question is, what is Agile all about? So to answer this question, we will focus on the following items. Number one, we will identify the set of Agile values and principles. Sometimes we call it Agile Manifesto. Secondly, we will identify the iterative approach in Agile. And lastly, we will identify how Agile changed the traditional approach into an incremental approach. Okay, so now let's proceed to the values and principles. Okay, so let's focus on Agile Manifesto. In Agile Manifesto, there are 4 Agile values that we need to consider. Number 1 is individuals and interactions over the process and tools. What does it mean? So when we talk about individual and interaction, we are dealing with the importance of all the members concerned, and by giving them the enough support and trainings. Okay, so in these values, we give more importance to each individuals, to each member, rather than give importance to the process and tools like your technology, your materials. Secondly, there is working software over than comprehensive documentation. In these values, we focus on the output rather than providing so much document on your project. Number 3, customer collaboration over contract or negotiation. Even though contract is important, but customer collaboration is more important. Why? Because we can collect more data, we can identify customer needs, and we can provide good output or good software after our collaboration with the customer. And lastly, we have here responding to change over following a plan. So in Agile, we usually accept all the changes that may occur during the development. Yes, there is a plan that needs to follow, but in Agile, we accept changes. We entertain changes. Okay? So let's proceed to our next item. Okay, now it shows here a figure of an Agile as an iterative approach. Why iterative approach? Simple as it shows us a cycle. From this example, you can see the word define, going to build, and release. So if we're talking about a software development, define means creating a plan, setting your plan, and for build is we have to code. We are on the development stage, and then we also are doing testing. And lastly, for the cycle of an agile in iterative approach, we have the release. So release is equivalent to deployment. So we make sure that for every cycle or iterative approach in Agile, there is a release in which we provide good product, or we may say a working product. Okay, now this is a deeper Agile iteration. Why deeper? On the previous example, we just show here a simple or single iteration, but in reality, an agile iteration can produce multiple iterations. Sometimes we call it sprint. Okay, so we produce multiple sprint for us to produce our final product. For every sprint, we will conduct plan, build, test, and review. And again, for the second iteration, another plan, build, test, and review up to the last iteration. And again, in Agile, for the final release, we make sure that your product is a working system. Okay. So let's have this example. Okay. So this kind of figure show us how Agile changed the approach in software development or in project development. Okay, why? So try to think of it that the first figure on top, the not like this, is what we call the traditional approach. Okay, why traditional approach? We have here 1, 2, 3, and 4 release. Okay, those are releases, meaning first release, the traditional approach can only provide wheels. Okay, is it functional? No. Okay, so meaning this project can only be functional at the end of the release or at release number 4. But try to look at the below figure about like this. So like this figure is a good example of an agile in incremental approach. Okay, why? So again, for the first release, item number 1, you can see an output like a skateboard. So initially, a project started into a small project, but this is a working project. It is a running device. It is a running cart. Okay, and then on the second release, we have another development, and then we improve the previous product or the previous development. And then when we reach the final stage or the final release or release number 5, we have a big picture, a working product, okay, of our plan. But take note of this, even though we are talking about the first release or the first project cycle, okay, of this agile implementation in incremental approach, we have a working product at the very beginning. From one skateboard going to scooter, going to bicycle, motorcycle, and then to a real car. Okay, that is agile. So another approach, this is for iterative and also for the incremental approach in agile. So try to compare this figure. Both are a process or an agile method. Okay, the first one is iterative, and we accept changes. Try to look at the changes on how the paintings of Mona Lisa changed from release 1 up to release 5. Okay, and then for incremental, we targeted certain part of Mona Lisa, and then up to release 5, from head, face, arms, and the whole body, and that is also an agile methodology. Okay, now how this agile related to my work? Okay, and now as Scrum Master, I will introduce to you the word Scrum. Okay, again we will focus on the following item to identify what is Agile or what is Scrum in Agile. So the first item is Scrum is a subset of Agile. Okay, what does that subset mean? So we will discuss that later. And secondly, a Scrum is a lightweight process or framework. Okay, why lightweight or why framework? Okay, let's proceed. So number one is why Scrum is a subset of Agile. So we may say that there are framework in software development or in project development that replicate the values of Agile. So one of it is the Scrum. Aside for Scrum, we also have Kanban, we also have Crystal, we also have XP, DS, DM, FDD, and RAP. So it depends on your company, it depends on your tools, it depends on your skills, on how we will adopt Agile. And then when you embodied Agile, you will choose your technology, you will choose your framework. On my end, we choose Scrum. Okay, so why Agile is a subset of why Scrum is a subset of Agile? Try to look at this figure. If you will remember, this figure is similar to this one, which is what we discussed on the previous slide. So there in Scrum, there is also what we call the iterations. But aside for iteration, we can also talk about the other aspect of Scrum. Okay, in Scrum, we call it the procedures or the artifacts. Okay, so initially, I can introduce to you the background. There is backlog, product backlog, which is part of the planning. Then we have here on the right the product, which is part of the release. And within the iteration, there is Scrum that practice Agile, as well as there is another process or procedure, which is what we call a daily meeting. Okay, so we will discuss more about that on the next chapter. Okay, so again, this is the same thing with Agile. So Scrum deliver incremental procedure or incremental process. Okay, but as part of the artifact or procedures of Scrum, we have to consider the event and also the plans. Okay, what are the events? As you can see here, aside for the product backlog or for the product output, we have here an event which is what we call a sprint planning. Okay, aside for sprint planning, another event that we have here is the sprint review. And aside for sprint review, we have sprint retrospective. And lastly, we also have here a daily Scrum. So we can only consider a framework as a Scrum if those events are existing in our framework. Again, a Scrum can be a Scrum if there is sprint planning, sprint review, and sprint retrospective, plus the daily Scrum meeting. Okay. And aside for those events, we also have to consider the team, or what we call the Scrum team. So the question is, who are those member of the Scrum team? So try to look at this. I'm here, the Scrum Master. And aside for the Scrum Master, we have the product owner. And then, especially on our field, in IT industry, we have developers. So, big question about the Scrum team. How many members or how many individuals is necessary on a Scrum team? 2, 3, 4, or 5? Okay, the answer is 10 or less member. Maximum of 10 or less. Okay, so what are the specific role of the Scrum Master inside the Scrum team? So sometimes they say that the Scrum Master should be a servant leader. Servant leader, yes. Why? One of my major role is to guide the developers to follow what? The Scrum event. They need to undergo the sprint planning, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. Okay. So developers do the coding, do the testing, do the deployment. What about the product owner? So product owner communicates to the Scrum team and also to the stakeholders or to the business. So the product owner collects the what we call product backlog. So product backlogs are the tasks that needs to accomplish during the Scrum. Okay, during the iteration or during the sprint. Okay, so to know more about the Scrum, you can search on Google the scrum.org. It's a website that gives us information about Scrum, Agile, product owner, and also it offers certifications for the following roles. But this short video will give us the actual scenario that that process during the Scrum. Okay, so hope you enjoy this one. So let's play this video.
Software is transforming the world, and as it does, new opportunities arise, creating uncertain risks and rewards. Traditional models of development often focus on efficiency over value, and apply processes that just don't work. Projects can run over schedule, over budget, and products may be outdated by the time they are delivered to market. What are you to do? Scrum is the answer. Scrum is used by over 12 million people around the world for products big and small. It all starts with the product owner who represents customers and other stakeholders. The product owner drives the product backlog, a prioritized, dynamic list of all the work that might be needed for the product. Work is done by a self-organizing development team during the sprint, a period of 1 to 4 weeks. During sprint planning, based on the sprint goal, the sprint backlog is created. With the definition of done in place, the development team works together to deliver value. Once a day, the development team meets for 15 minutes for the daily Scrum to inspect and adapt their progress toward the sprint goal, and to surface dependencies or impediments. So who makes sure that Scrum is understood and enacted? The Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is the servant leader of the Scrum team, and helps everyone understand Scrum theory, practices, and rules. As the team works towards the sprint goal, the increment grows iteratively, allowing the team to inspect and adapt empirically based on progress. To improve transparency, the increment can be released continuously during the sprint. At the end of the sprint, the Scrum team invites the stakeholders to the sprint review, where they collectively inspect the results. After the sprint review, the Scrum team runs a sprint retrospective, where they evaluate how they worked and build a plan for how to improve. Scrum provides an empirical foundation for teams, enabling them to deliver more frequently, with higher value and better outcomes to customers. Get higher value from your teams, and make your customers happy. Visit scrum.org, the home of Scrum, to begin your journey.
Okay, so I think that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask it. And I hope that sooner uh, you can be one of those agile professionals or agilists. And see you around. Thank you for listening, and thank you for participating for my short sharing for today. Thank you and goodbye.